All right, restorative time. So we got a bolster across the mat, 2 blankets at the very back behind, a block in front of the bolster. And you're going to sit on top of that little block with the back of the pelvis, so you'll feel around your tailbone zone. I've got a belt, and it's a loop around my legs at the top of my thighs. And as I lean back, and then as soon as I find that the waist easily shifts and elongates, noticing these small moments of kind of creating a nice crisp pose. So you want to feel like you can fine tune the posture. So I try to get my belt pretty high up on my legs. And then as I reach the feet down, as if I'm just straightening the legs, then my back muscles respond a little bit. Now, feeling where that belt is, I want you to be sure that it's pretty firming for your legs. And that would mean that for me, I'm going to take my feet a little farther apart, but not so far apart it hurts my legs, right, with the belt pressure. So if this is a little much for you with this whole process with the legs straight, you can certainly do this with the knees bending. Okay, so keeping those fluctuating motions at any time. Take a sandbag or just let it slide and be on top of your thighs. So it's somewhere in balance with the content of your hips. Now think of this, when I create a session, I work with kind of content creation, right? Creating the content. So when we are working with the bones, and especially the knee joint here, for some of you might notice it, might not even be a sensation of issue, but be sure that the legs can just release. They started with firming. Now the firming is helping you relax, and then spread the chest open via the arms spanning wide. Deciding if you want 1 blanket or 2. If you are capable of going down to that 1, just be sure that if you bring your hand behind your neck, right, almost where the neck meets the skull, like the occiput, that area, that shelf, be sure that whole lane of travel at the neck it's kind of like a bridge. It feels like it's tone, but it's not compressing, meaning you're not feeling like your chin pushing into your chest. So it has to stand on its own there. And if it doesn't, then you fill it in with a blanket. Nothing's wrong with you. Some people just find that their structure is better with 2 blankets. Settle in with the arms open and the eyes resting back into the skull. And feel as you create each breath, that interaction of filling the body and centering back towards the earth. So feeling that sense of surrender and trust in the props, all of them, even the belt that's holding you together. And finding the practice as access into settling and calming and becoming present. Feeling that upper respiratory tree, which would be the lungs, the bronchial tubes, the throat. It might be most obvious in your ribs and the bones that are in motion because of the props. The bolster kind of tilts up the rib cage. But also noticing your inhale and the exhale out of the mouth. It is a little more challenging to be in a back bending pose for your lungs. So we're working on strengthening and also getting in touch with how we are with our breathing. Now feeling and scanning the sensation in the sandbag area. And I want you to move the legs so that they slide the feet in. And actually, I don't know if you could say it's the legs that do it. It's probably the pelvic control. And then we'll take away the sand. You might put it back up on your rib cage in the next few moments, but unbuckle. And I want you to keep that belt now. So you're going to hold on to that and bring the arms to hold, the hands holding the belt, and it's generous, so it's quite wide. And you could flow the arms back behind you. You could keep them kind of standing up out of their socket spaces, right, reaching up. But if you work your arms moving back, that would be a nice option. Try for that. And then let your elbows fall open, so perhaps they touch to the blanket or the floor. And bring the feet together, the knees out, for just a mini moment here of just noticing the knees, the texture of the thighs when they're kind of pulsed in this deep stretch for the groins. Noticing what it's like when you're on the block for this. Because we will do the same type of movement with the knees soon enough, where you'll feel what it's like when the pelvis is in an arch versus more flat in this shape. So relax the tendency to arch, that's okay. Don't hold back on something that might offer you an ability to be composed and centered in the position. And as your knees flow back up, take it slow. So slow moving of the knees in towards each other, scoot the feet apart so they're wider than hips distance. And then as you bring the hands to slide out from holding onto the belt, let's go ahead and bring the arms wide, just like we were. And we're going to start to move into the side rib cage. So I want you to push into your feet and then roll to your left and move the block just a little bit back and then maybe overhead would probably be a delightful version. And then you'll be rotating into the ribs, rib roll. And as we come into the side sage, you'll bring your blanket stack so it's directly underneath the left side of your head. And the block, I'd like to have one overhead, but not everyone uses that. So this is another shoulder direction, right? So we have this quality of open, and let's go into this with the ball. So I've got the ball on the inside of that right leg, and we're just getting to each of these shapes pretty quickly in the beginning. So we're going to slide any sand onto your hip. If you like the sandbag lengthwise, you can also approach this range, but feel when you are using that sand on the side that it's the ideal is that it's kind of sensing some gravitational pull, right? It adds weight. And if it does take your breath away, right, it feels like it's difficult to get a full comforting breath, then you'll put the sand lower, right, across the hip. So right arm goes overhead. If you find a block, using that support under your hand, and your head might turn towards the ceiling. Your head might be really pushing down on its left side, relaxing into the blanket. Those two ideas really go hand in hand. Relaxing into it or really pushing. Confusing instructions. But when you're lengthening your side, give yourself some exposure of moving that armpit on the right side, feeling maybe it opens a little bit. And then as your eyes kind of cruise, focus inwards, nice to sense the experience of the ribs moving with the breath. And it's okay if it's just a little pulse where it feels like it fills up. And the exhale could feel much longer than the inhale. Like you let go of more than you take in. So take in a nice pure connection through the side. And then as you exhale, letting go. Now getting comfortable with these reaching potential of our ribs and our chest cavity, the thoracic, so that mid chamber. So if that right hand is touching down, whether it's across, like on the bolster, it's overhead, feel if you can move from your rib cage. I know the arm tends to be what gets to reach towards something for you to move through even poses, but feel if your movement of your ribs open towards the ceiling. So it's like the more dense part of your body creates the movement. And then of course your arm will probably, it can't resist following. But feel if you can open out that right arm so you counterspin towards the ceiling, and maybe you roll into the back of your head. Now, if that's a little iffy for you, you can keep the left side of your head down. Okay, but maybe getting a feel of the back of the head and that circulation down through that right thigh. Okay, so this internal rotation of the right knee. Now, as you sweep that right hand back down over to the left arm, you're going to roll to come up, but I want you to take your bolster and pivot that bolster so it leans up on top of your blankets. Shift your sand, of course, and the ball might be stuck. But as you get your other block from behind you, we're going to take up residence in Supta Baddha Konasana, but let's go without the belt so that we can move into these other hip shapes without any challenges with getting in and out of something. So what we'll take is the feet together so you're seated right in front of your bolster. The bolster is kind of attached to your sacrum area. And then when you lean back, how can you kind of work with like cat pose before you tip back, and then how you start to arch the spine. And feel if you can put your hands kind of back besides the bolster, and then move from that cat, that rounded back, and then lengthen so that there's flow through the spine. Okay, it's different without the belt, I think, tiny bit. And we may get into these habits of making it easier for us because the belt gives you some reference for balance and evenness. But let's try getting those blocks so they're sufficient height under your legs. And if they kind of push in awkwardly, you might kind of tip a block on its side if you can somehow finagle that one. Some days it really works out well, and some days they just kind of crumble back down. Must be an entire science to blocking poses. Okay, so feel as the inner thighs release. And as you move the ribs to openness, we're going to bring the arms so that you'll cross the right arm over the left, intertwine the arms, and feel just that hug of the shoulders, right? You're stretching open the upper back like it's a hug, right? So the right arm is over the left, hooking the arm over, kind of hooks right into the inner left elbow, intertwine, and feel the elbows as if they're kind of lowering down towards your navel. I don't imagine they're going to get anywhere near there, but it's a directional pull for the shoulder. So give a feel for this. If your legs aren't feeling comfortable in the blocks, then you might need to change them until they're settling. The feet are comfortably together. Of course, I guess we could have added a sandbag to the feet, but we're getting through the beginning stage here. Okay, now try to keep those shoulder bones centering, not pushing back. And then change the crossing. Now, in between, you might just keep it real plain so you're not trying to exude, reach through the armpit chest. You're crossing the left arm over the right, and you kind of reach around. And instead of giving yourself a hug, you hook the elbows. Yep. And you take an arm twist. So you're stretching through the lower connective tissue of the arm from the elbow to that forearm. It's kind of a tricky area. It's generally likes to get massage, right? You don't know it's so boggy until it's touched. So we're trying to move some circulation through and feeling that circulation of breath. Belly softens. Okay, now unwind the arms and reach down to the blocks and slide the knees go towards each other now, and you're going to slide the blocks out and get a ball. Place it to the upper outer left thigh. If you don't have a ball, you could use a block and tilt it, so it'd be in the same spot. But if you have a ball, use that and keep the block kind of out to the side. Lift up. Now find that the back is in kind of this nice arching, it's like a perfect back bending, yoga bench is what your spine is like right now. That's what they developed those with this position in mind. So when you push down to your left foot and lift the right foot and cross the ankle to the left knee, kind of do minimal shifting around, try to see if you have that momentum and strength in your hip. And then as that right foot is crossed, there's tendencies to scoot the tailbone down. So I want you to try to keep it established, so as little movement around the bolster as possible. And you'll place that ball snug next to the upper outer left thigh. Tilt the body weight over to the left, so it's kind of tipping over to the left side and holding the right knee. And as you hold on to that knee, your outer left foot starts to become what holds our weight on the foot, right? Not the bottom of the foot. And it's very tippy, right? It's like when we use the block, we kind of tip it in. It's just like that with the foot. So you're not on the bottom, but you sickle the foot a little bit. So when you hold onto that right knee, can you sense that you're directing the circulation in the right hip? Okay, so you could pull the knee a little towards you, but it's minimal. It doesn't even look like I'm doing any pulling, but I am feeling that into my hip, into my glute. And, or you could feel the hand on that leg kind of draw the knee towards the left. Do a little of both, and then try to land into your hip. Should feel like a nugget of awareness in that right upper leg. If you want to kind of flush it out, get a scrub brush probably, huh? Hip cleanse. And now get a block and then let go of the knee and bring that block so you press it on the inside of that right thigh. So think about, it's not in the knee. So I have my block. I still have the ball in that left leg. It's just stuck to it. But you're going to do a little palpation. So I have that block, and the firmness of it is the key. So in the distance of your block, for some of you that may have more length, you might have the block so it's tall setting, pushing, because I don't want you to stress your shoulder to do this. Some of you might place the block flats and just want to push a little and find where that inner leg can use that pressure. If it's a little bit boggy and sincerely tense there, palpation would be better than just pushing and kind of forcing. circulation. So a little bit of movement, jostling through that inner leg tissue. Okay. Give it a few more times, like you get the block pushing into your skin and you're moving that skin towards the knee, right? You're not trying to brush it down towards the hip, but you're pushing it away. Okay. Kind of scraping it a little bit. Okay, now shifting, right foot down, left foot up, cross it to the right knee, take the ball to the upper outer right thigh and go right into that second side. Hold onto the left knee, right? And feeling the range of pulling that you like to work with in your right hand. You could let the left arm stretch back. Last time I spent more energy just centering with my arm down, and only so much energy that you might want to put into making it look a certain way, right? It's almost as if it's such a specifically focused on yourself practice, even more so at home. So if you can find that inner drive, whether you're pulling the leg towards you with the hand on the knee or you're driving it a little to the right, there's probably a little bit of both, right? It's not necessarily just one direction. This side, I'm feeling I'm pulling a little to the right more than towards me. So I'm doing this as kind of a baseline assessment in more the beginning of the session, so that those of you that are working with some things with the hip, piriformis, sciatic kind of things, then this might give you a nice baseline to feel where you're at, where it's, charged. Only bring it to the into the light for right now. We'll see if we can jostle it out a little bit. We can try. And if it's really fierce and uncomfortable and nauseating, right? Sometimes these stretches can be too much, then you have to dilute it a little bit, get rid of some of that intensity. And let's come out of that pattern and get the block and place it to that left inner leg. So my knee is now in this reclining, pigeon pose, really. But I'm resting on my spine, and I push with the hands onto that block. And probably sincere, simplicity here. What would be the most easeful, even if it's just mildly massaging? Each side you could be a little different with your directness to it. And if it's kind of mysterious around your knee, it would be slower and stay with those thick tissues of the inner thigh. They're definitely could be kind of boggy, and they have a different kind of shield-like quality. So much lymph right in the inner thigh. The leg pits are very lymphy. So it's not the same kind of feeling when you are stretching them like your quads. It's kind of a mixture of muscle and lymph. I don't know much quad lymphy stuff, but inner thighs, there's a lot of circulation going on to your vital organs, right? Okay, so once we feel that circulation now with the pressure, take that away and then get ready. Let's see where our blocks, we want one overhead, okay? Cross through the left leg and then roll to your right side and try to stay really stuck to your props here. So when you roll to the right, you'll probably put the ball to the left leg anyhow, just to support your knee. Even if your knee doesn't feel like it needs the height, if you watch the body, just if you're observing someone's pose, if this knee goes down to the ground, it kind of takes my hip out of alignment, and so it makes my knees push, well, even though this knee isn't pushing in, it's more of that X-leg pattern with our leg, so it's not really what you're aiming for with your hip joint. Okay, so even just a little bit of lift is ideal. Although many people just refuse to do that because they don't feel discomfort, but maybe in the long run it would be better just to support the knee. Okay, so feel how that right side is down to the side sage. We've got our bolster now turned to horizontal. And now when I lean down, Yeah, if I turn my head to the right and I'm here, I feel like I need more blanket, basically. Okay, I need more blanket to have less left neck stress on the left side. Now, if I lean in and wherever my sand is, you can have it on your hip or your side, and then I reach the right arm any which way. If I turn to the back of my head, that might be easier for some of our necks. But you'll be the decider on how your blanket will be and how your head will turn or not turn. And the arm is probably even more personal, right? If it will reach overhead, if it will stretch wide through the armpit chest. Such an interesting area as well, the armpit chest, right? The lymph drain. Even if you just hold it open and feel that circulation through the waist. Go slow. Even when you're in a still position, like where does your mind flow towards? You can still kind of start over again with your mentality and your practice, even this far into it, like trying to stay with the centered breath, the moment here, the experience of the kind of the flesh reaching, but then below that is that density, right, in the connective tissue. These are fairly kind of thick poses that we go through. Okay, so we'll take a few more moments here. It's sometimes helpful to know maybe where our bones are going to be moving towards. And we are going to be doing some upright patterns very soon. And so this beginning gives us kind of a heaviness setting into our bones and the spatial possibilities. But movement of legs and around does get some circulation response, I think, quite nicely. So we'll just kind of link that in today, see where it ends up, huh? Okay, now if that left arm is in a reaching position, you're going to either move it open to the left so the chest fans out, or you're going to turn down towards the right side. So either way, we're starting to transition. And so when you move and you shift down over towards your right, I want you to bring the left knee towards the right leg and take the sand away. And then when you come up, kind of turn so you're kind of facing towards the back space so your spine gets that full rotation. Okay. We've done this like sleeping stage before where we turn and we would lie on the bolster. So I want you just to take a moment of this. So we go to the right, and then you're going to turn back forward. The ball might be stuck there, so do just put it aside. You're going to turn towards the left one more time. My hands are on the bolster, or if you don't like that, the hands are back on the blanket. So it's a little bit easier on my shoulder. Okay, so you get these two turns. You get two turns. Okay, now coming up, we're going to move the bolster to any side of your mat. Better for me to put on that side so it's not blocking your view. And then take a blanket and just let your body do a little bit of kneeling action on the blanket. We did some work with Child's Pose the other day. I want you just to kind of, remember. I know some of you may not have a clear memory of what we did with the blanket on the calves, but kind of remember that we don't have to push our hips all the way back to our heels. So what you're going to place is your knees about hips distancing, and you'll have your blocks so they're kind of wide out to the sides of your mat. And then as you kind of launch your weight, even feel what it's like when you're on knees, and then how do you launch your weight forward? So the fingers spread out, the shoulders shrug back, and then we're going to blend cat-cow with up dog, and then child's pose. So you'll let your toes relax, and you'll round your back. So feel from that spine motion, try to get some motion and fluidity through your back. And then as you inhale, feel the natural arch. So start with both of these two directions, cat, cow. And once that back region is lengthening, right, from the skull to the tail, I want you to lean a little bit back. So we're off of the feet, right? We're not sitting back to our feet. Okay, now hands go out a little wider. If you need to create more space on your mat, open it up. And then as you go forward, really feel how the tailbone doesn't push back and up, but it actually lowers down. And then you lengthen forward and reach the front of the spine and just gently tilt the head up. Okay, good. And then when you come back, not going through the full cat, you're going to feel the back round and flex, so rounding and reaching back towards the feet, right? So it's a version of child's pose. It's more of a heart opener. And then rounding the back and weaving through and reaching through the spine. Okay, so take a few more of these total. And I would encourage you to go slower, to kind of meditate on how your hips react. And then if you want to speed it up and see if your circulation meets the requirements of getting all the points, lifting through the front spine. And then the area you want to be a little careful of is the low back. So not tugging those low back muscles. And then once you come back towards table, don't get all the way into table. Don't become a whole table. Feel your hands in a little bit so the hands are wider than shoulder width, toes under. Lift up the knees and firm up the legs for a moment. I know you might want to kind of stomp out the feet, but feel if you can firm up the legs and have that reach from your heels, trying to draw towards the floor. This is a real firming shape, right? For arms, for legs, for spines. It's not a real spine fluid position, is it? But it is an inversion. Okay, so we'll walk the hands back towards the feet. And I want you to slide the feet maybe a little forward, depending on your flexibility, if that works for you. When you lean down to this forward bend, take a reach with your hands so that there's more of a dangling versus like a holding and tightening with your elbows. Feel if you can let the spine transition into a experience of flowing. I just imagine that would be such a great release to feel like I can connect better with the flowing nature of a spine, because it has its three curves. My body feeling is it can be kind of a stiff area sometimes, the spine, right? You can shake your leg and your arms, but it's not like the same with your spine, except for some yoga poses that you can maneuver your back muscles through postures. So with the head heavy and maybe stiffness, you might find, oh, my legs are tense. This is a lot for my circulation, or maybe your face feels really full. So you're going to reach how the hips lift behind you. Feel the lift of the sitting bones. Okay, we'll shift it out a little bit. So bend your knees, and what we're going to do is we're going to flow up, and then we're going to take a wide stance. So if you got a belt nearby, keep it. You're going to be needing it. And then as you get, let's do that now. Let's get our belt. Okay, so you have it, and place it behind you. We don't all have to create this exact pattern, but have a wide hold on the belt so it's very generous space in grasping the belt behind you and behind the rear and maybe a little bit up. And with that lift up, I want you to bend into the knees, and then you're going to push, and you're going to stand and turn to, I would say, left. Go to your left so you take a wide stance. You'll see most of me, but not everything. And feel how your arms are back. Okay, so here's the side vision. You got your feet in a wide stance and your arms are stretching back so the chest is open. You might not be able to see all of that, but the arms are holding the belt wide behind me. Okay, so it's an opener. Now the feet have to have a very specific pointed forward version. So I want you to firm up the legs just like you did in down dog. Your legs were firming. And as you tip forward at the hips, then your tail moves back, but you still have that arch in the spine. So when you go down to that wide stance, your feet might start to pivot out. So see if you can gravitate towards a little more inner foot, right? So the toes are in, and the arms will stay attached to that belt. And if it's a little too much in your shoulder, you can drop your belt and hold the legs. So everyone has a choice here. Now, if you're holding onto the belt and going over head, see if you can bend through your knees, feel the ribs releasing down, and let go of the belt and stretch your hands far forward as they can go on the floor. Now, if the flooring is too distant for your muscles to work towards, just get some blocks and have those so they're in front of your hands. And I want you to have a stance so everything's reaching. It's not a slumped over holding feet shape, but it's a reaching shape. So there's more extension out of your spine, okay? Yeah. So when you have that reach, your armpit chest lengthens. And there is an ability now to lower your head down. And so you'll feel that transfer of blood flow to the brain. And probably the neck holds back a little bit, so let the weight of your head go heavy. Really stretching all the way through the roots of the legs, down through the inner thigh to the back leg, lengthening. Okay. Now let's try taking the hands back to the space between the feet and reach your left hand for the right outer leg and bring the right arm up towards the ceiling. If you start to lose your sense of balance here, you might bring your feet closer together. You can just scoot them in a little bit. If you're getting a little wobbly or feeling kind of like dizzy, you get your feet closer. But you want to feel that turn so the left elbow bends. And then switch sides. Reach the right hand for the left leg. Turn your head so you're looking up towards the left hand. If you missed that idea on the first side, no worry, we got the twist in the spine. You know, as you lower the left hand down, if you have blocks that you're using in front, I want you to get those two blocks. If they're on the other side of your mat, when you turn to your right foot on your mat, everyone's on mat so they don't slip away. Gotta get my belt out from here. Okay, turn so that you're in a right side lunge. But I want you to maintain so that that knee is above the ankle. And then can you start to lower down that left thigh, but the difference is that we're not gonna put the knee on the blanket right now, or on the ground. So I want you to bend the knee, the left knee, and then really working on powering through the legs, a lot of leg power. And as you move your head center and forward, you're going to push into the left foot, the ball of the foot, not the heel, but just the ball, because my heel is up. And I want you to tilt back, and as you reach your tail back, you're going to lift the toes on the right foot up, so the heel is down the front foot, stretching through the calf. And then alternate, bottom of the right foot down, roll through the position. This time you're kind of pushing off the ball of the back foot so you feel like you're pushing forwards, right? And then as you breathe, exhale, swing the pendulum the other way. So toes up on the right foot, head down. Okay, one more time. Lunging, feel through that right leg, feeling muscular work. Head forward. Okay, and then as we come back, full reach through the waist, through the spine. We're all different with flexibility range. So some of us might have our blocks higher. Some might have them a little lower, some a little closer. And then as you lower down that right foot, I want you to reach through the right knee above the ankle, feel the lunge for the lowering back leg. And then try to bring that back knee down to a padding. So it's a blanket, unless your floor is, a nice cushiony ground, you don't need a blanket. But when you lunge, feel that left thigh reaching forwards, the back leg, the front of it, right? So the hip is feeling like it moves a little forwards. Okay, now we're going to tip back, step the right foot back so the knee is beside the left. Bring your blocks down so they're flat, unless you don't want to use them for up dog, that's fine. You can go with or without blocks under your hands. And then as you lean forward, just relax your toes on your feet and just let them relax. I don't know where else your toes would be. Lengthen to the front. Try to feel that you're reaching from your thigh lids through your hips. And now when you come back to table, sneak the left foot forward. I mean, you'll be obvious you have a left foot between your blocks now, but sneak it through. And then as you find that ability to lunge through that thigh balance, toes under right foot, lift up the knee. And then if your blocks need to go up, this is a good time to make that switch. And you'll reach back with your hips, the toes up on the left foot. And I want you to go through this side, right into it. So you alternate lunge and then reverse lunge. Okay, it's not about trying to get your head higher up or off of your blocks. You're really working with the intensity through the legs. So really feeling that circulation flow from the lower extremities. Okay, toes lifting, right, when you lean back. And then thigh is blending forwards, lower down the back knee, toes relaxed. This time, let's get our bolster, slide it in, so it's right in front of your right thigh, and then lean a little bit down. Now, you might be continuing that same flush of the thigh, the stomach meridian, right, in Chinese medicine, right, is the quads. So it's going to be interesting working through that generally fairly stiff fibers. So try to let the body reach through that thigh. All right, they're kind of shield-like, the quads. Now, if your blocks are high up, right, if you can start to lower it down. So we're not going through up dog between those two sides. If you haven't figured that out, we got this bolster in the way. So let's walk the left foot toe heel to the right side of your mat. And then you might have to push the hips a little bit back to walk the foot farther to the right. And then you take pigeon pose. So you're trying to get the flesh to be basically pulled with a bolster. So this is a nice, even though this is kind of the easy way to do pigeon, I find it just suggests the right arrangement of the joint, and the muscles are kind of nicely opened up. So if this is just a little much, remember you can put another blanket or a towel under the left buttock. I don't think the ball would work too well, but it wouldn't have you sit far enough back. So I want you to feel that your back is in this kind of upright pigeon. So a stirred pigeon, pigeon stirring. And then if you feel comfortable coming back to the blocks or the floor even. And some of us have done many talented pigeon shapes. So you might want to stay with the kind of plain version here. If you'd like to take some changes of motion with your arms, you could reach them to the front right side, right? So you go to about 1 o'clock on the right-hand side with the blocks. Okay, and some of you might find that simply putting your elbows down is just plenty, right? That might be even enough for your hip to kind of marinate and steep the left side. If the right leg is heavy, it probably gets even less consciousness, since how much consciousness can you actually embody? That can be interesting here. Can you pretend it's not there? Okay, sense the flow of the spine by the breath. So the breath initiates that spinal motion. Okay, now when you come up, we'll be on the bolster. So I want you to shift your hands back so it pulls the shoulders to strength, right? So you now have to kind of push away the floor to get yourself to arch. So this is one way I like to use my practice, is for that resistance, right? Weight bearing resistance work for the bones. So use your body weight, right? But feel just your body weight, not trying to suggest being more, trying more to feel what is actually there. And then when you lean to the left hip, and you're going to bring the right leg forward, you'll kind of get a feel now of centering and sitting. And let's do two options. Some of you like the full twist, some could care less about it like this. So those of you that are going to take a twist, we'll keep the leg the same. So this is the same pigeon leg I just had. I haven't changed it. It's pretty much exactly where it was. I'll put my sand on the left thigh. So I'm adding to that, dressing my pigeon leg. So my right leg goes over the left, and then I take a twist. Okay, and the block would be definitely invited on this one, so I can use that rotation. Okay, now, those of you that find no twist for me, knee doesn't like it right now, then don't do it. So here's the option 2, would be I put my sand on my right thigh, I let the left foot slide out, and I put a ball under my left knee or a block, and then I reach out on my waist, and as I lean forward, my abdomen relaxes, and I bring my hands either to 2 blocks or to the floor, or I keep them on my bolster and tip forward. So this would be a little bit more in the hip, wouldn't it? It's like hip 2, first pigeon and then into this. Fire logs pose, right? Fire logs would be if this foot was on this left knee, but not going to do that for my knees. So this is kind of a messy fire logs pose. Missing the fire logs. So keep the pattern, whether you're twisting or leaning forward. Okay, and sense the movement of the breath. If you're in a twist, focus on inhaling to lengthen, exhaling to twist. Even when you're in the pose, there's more twist. The back ribs, the thick back ribs. Get some breath into those lungs, right? Thick back ribs. Okay, now the neck could take its own turn for this twist. The neck has its own way of trying. So when you come out of the pose, whether you're cross-legged, we all have the right leg is forward anyway, whether it's up or it's in front. Take that cross-legged shape for a moment, and you can have your sand probably on the right thigh, gets you a little bit more centered. And then interlace your fingers at the roots, push the palms forward, and then as you flow the arms up, Usta Hastasana, reaching arms overhead. See if you can let the lower abdomen relax. So you're not trying to stiffen and pull. You're letting the spine center, and the arms keep that frame and that halo around your head. And then let your elbows lower down front, and then relax your grip. Roll your shoulders a few times. And try to make things nice and complete. And then taking off the sand and taking pigeon with the right leg bending. This might be an easier way to get into it. You just let the body sit on the bolster. The right knee bends. And then you kind of tip over to the right. Little teapot tipping. And then if you got something stuck behind you, you'll kick it away probably. And you'll shift so that the right knee is pointed out. If it's uncomfortable on your knee, you want to sit on more height, right? That'll create less pressure. Okay. Of course, if I bring my right foot farther forward, that's not necessarily good for everybody. So you've got to sense that's the instruction usually, get this foot forward so it's straight across the front of the mat, right? Or that angle, but keep it comfortable for you. So elbows down if you got two blocks, or you're going to use the floor, or you're going to take your hands and your blocks over to the left side. Let it be all about the hip, right? Kind of dominating your curiosity, like, you've got an area to scan and feel the hip. How would you reach through your back? How would you reach through the hip bones? And be sure that left leg behind you is passive. It's completely relaxing. Now, energetically, just scan your, clearly we live in a body with nervous system, so some places have, inflammation. You'll notice those spaces sometimes more than others, but, kind of feel with your connection, right? How you're going to get yourself forward to sitting. So one tactic might be you just do it, right? You just cross your leg and to the left side it goes forward, but you might feel absorption right through that right sitting bone. And then tilt to the right, walk your hands into the center towards your right knee. And then as the left leg reaches, good, you're going to bring that left leg forward so the leg still bends when it crosses. Now let's say you're not taking the twist. Maybe you bring your left foot in front of the right knee, and then you center your seat. These are all kind of fun ways of getting, even though the body feels really compact sometimes, or there's tensioning, right? You can kind of work with, I don't know if that's a word, tensioning, probably not. So cross the leg over the right leg. Those of us that are twisting are adding a sandbag to the right thigh. And we're going to spend our energy on rotating to the left, hooking that right elbow to the left leg and reaching to the block. Also both. Second version is crossing. So the left foot is in front of the right knee or shin. It doesn't have to be knee, ball under the right thigh, stand on left leg. And then you can find that spine basin. Right? So it feels like the spine basin, just like when you twist, it's like you want to feel that natural arch, but also you want the abdomen to soften, the pit of the belly, so the arch is more comfortable. Especially with the twist, you have to keep that breath lifting and rotating, massaging the organs. And then your hands, for those of us in the seated forward motion, will come down with our hands on a block or on the floor. Yeah, they're both interesting for the lower belly. So to strengthen the diaphragm, you'll get more than the twist, right? But the only way to work on strengthening it is to have the belly relaxed. Because if you're not having a calm belly and you're trying to pull and pull with the spine, right, the diaphragm will freeze up. So feel the abdomen resting and then consciousness with that twist. Do a hybrid of the two. Get a little bit of both in. If you want to do a little bit of both, you could. You could do the twist for another few seconds and then go to that forward motion. Not a problem. Okay, but those of us in the rotation, feel where the natural arches are through the spine. They're pretty obvious that there's all these different curves. And then as you unwind and come forward, take that sand away for a moment. I'm not going to take any rolls right now with our shoulders, but bring the feet forward. So you've got the simple hinge of the knees. And then as you sit centered on your bolster, take a block set. If you've got one behind you, move it to the side of you, side of your bolster. And then push the blanket back. Okay. Let me get centered here. And then as I lower back, I've got my ball somewhere. You got your ball. Push the legs. Actually, don't push them, just lift them. Place the ball between the knees so there's a nice spacer. And then that spacer is interesting because we kind of pull in at the sacrum a little bit so that we're on the bolster. So I want you to bend through the knees so that you've got the ball between them. Open out the arms. Your back of your pelvis is on your bolster. And just let the knees kind of saunter from side to side. And feel how maybe the ball needs to go a little bit closer to the inner thigh. For me, I tend to grip up my hip to do that if the ball's too far up the knee. So let the body kind of roll as if you're massaging that outer hip. After the pigeon and for some of us, the seated hip stretch or the twist, the hips can be very toned. So we're kind of mushing them a little bit. Hip mush. Okay, and let the ribs be free. They kind of flow with the breath. Yeah, the knees kind of swing a little bit. They don't just drop to right side to left side, but they lean and then they kind of swing as if they're going up towards your arm. At least that feels good for the hip. Okay, now as you come back in, knees to chest, ball goes away, and then find that sandbag. And finding the sand across your ribs so that you can, like it goes across both sides so that it flattens out, but actually you can feel the whole torso that way. Okay. And I'm going to scoot a little forward on the bolster so I'm at the very edge of it with my seat. And my blanket, I like to have one under my head for this pose. Now, I hope the sand stays wide. It doesn't always cooperate. But as my knees pull into my chest, I lift up the sand and then I lop it over the feet. And as I lift up through the legs, feel where the muscles of the lower leg branch, right? The calves, the ankles, they're not muscles, but the branches of the leg have that lift upside down. And then let the body, the tone of the legs, the firmness of the legs, steady. And do anything, any fussiness you need. Like if you feel like it's not quite perfect with your sand, spend the energy, stretch your back that way anyhow. But when you feel that stretch of the back of the knees, all the way down through the sitting bones, okay? Adjust so that you're the most balanced on the sides, on each side. And all the way up to the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. See if those feel somewhat balanced on your blanket. And then the arms open out. So they could be cactus, they could be straight out. You could even rest the arms up on the bolster. Sometimes this can feel nice for the wrists. Breathing, strengthening that diaphragm. And just let gravity assist the exhalation. A few moments here. Now try for a very full calf stretch. So feeling the toes moving towards the knees, right? So there's a full reach of the lower leg bones, flexing the feet. So they're going to really charge with that sand on them. I don't know if that charges your calves or not, but maybe there's a property with the sand in your calves. And the full moon, all of it. So when you get a feel of the magnitude of that, the calves, I want you to kind of maintain that calf flesh flow. It's usually stepped on all day, right? So it's compressed, and that circulation of the lymph is certainly not as fluid when we walk right on our two feet versus kind of crawling. So we're going to work with circulation in the calves and the hips. So bend through your knees. And then as you move the sand away, I want you to place the sandbag on the top of the left thigh, bend the right knee so it pulls in towards the chest. And then take the belt, and it looks like we're going to do a brain float, but I want you to do a personal choice on this one. So I like this calf kind of freshener sensation on my right leg. If I put the belt into a loop behind my head, it's not as much of a calf stretch. It's interesting, and it stretches right where the skull meets the neck, right? And that's interesting for our circulation too. But if this feels pretty good for you, you might stay with this for several moments and really get that flush of the back of the leg. If you're a brain floater and you want to connect your belt, make a loop, then you put that belt so that it would be, give a quick view of that. You can either keep it here with the hands both holding the belt, or you can connect in. You never heard of something like that, have you? Linked in, but not connected. Okay. So I got my belt, I got a loop, and it's pretty big. It's usually you need a bigger loop than you think. You kind of underestimate the weight of the brain, maybe. So when I place that at the occiput, where the skull meets the neck, that's an interesting focus, is to feel that. I still get a pretty good calf stretch actually, but it's different. I'm a fan of this sometimes. But occasionally I want to stay with the leg, all leg. So up to you. You choose brain float or leg float. Okay. So when I pull onto that belt, because that's my version right now, I'm sensing the calf, all back leg, pure. Okay, slide the sand off. Those of you in brain float, I guess you're probably coming out of it now. But hold the belt with the left hand. Belt is off the head. Cross the right leg over to the left and try to go straight over. So you're going to like 9 o'clock on the left side, right? You're not trying to aim downstream too much unless you must do that. If it's too much tension, you probably can't get the leg higher up. Getting this leg going higher and higher is very challenging for this IT band, but you can massage that area with your right hand. IT bands. Okay. To the lateral focus of the leg. Left foot is pretty sloppy, right? The bottom foot is not, tip-top form. It's not toes up. It just relaxes. Doesn't have any version of itself right now. It's holding space for anchoring the body. Okay. Now, try to maintain the contour of the leg. So even though you think of the bone here from the hip to the knee is straight, in your mind you might, unless you've studied it a bit, there's contour. So you'll bend your knee, so you'll feel like there's a little bit more swoop in the hip. And then when you come back center, okay, I want you to bring that belt off that right foot and then slip it to the left foot. And immediately you'll get your sand to that right thigh, because that leg was just crossed over and the hip was influenced. So you want to get the sand on there pretty quickly. And let it be on the top of that right thigh. Let go of your belt, do it. Sandbag cooperation is not always existing right now. Stay. Okay. It's animated sandbag. So pull, flex. If you pull and it doesn't respond, then you have to kind of remind it to stretch back. One side could be real different than the other. You might really notice circulation dynamics in the whole leg. Letting your head relax, nodding it side to side. If you're going with brain float, you got your loop, and you're going to bend your left knee a little bit and then scoop up your belt with your head. It is an unusual area to be working as a limb, right? Because limbic brain. So some people would consider this a limb. So it's nice to feel that you have that circulation there as well. If it doesn't feel good with the belt, then you take it away and you go back to holding on. Both good. Good. So feeling where that circulation masters through the back muscles, through the calf. Relax the right foot. Hold the belt together with the right hand, take it off your head if you're in brain float, and then hold it with just the right hand, and then let that left leg cross over to the right, so to about 3 o'clock, sand just falls off the right thigh, not a big deal. And you'll get a feel if your leg tries to go downstream, if it tries to go a little bit up. It won't try to go up higher to the right, but you'll get a feeling of completion into the muscle package on the side of this left leg. Yeah, and your head could roll to the left. That would be a nice balance. We are going to do one more hip crossover, but I want you to get a feeling of the fluidity of the cervical vertebrae. It's quite mobile anyhow. That's obvious by looking at our society, right? Our neck motion, it rounds really, it's quite supple. So getting it back to order is tough once it's gone that direction. So that's why we don't use too many blankets under our head. The minimum is best, and sometimes using the less. Something lower would be nice if you're comfortable with your neck. Okay, now with my ribs in this pattern of reaching, I don't feel like this is too much rib stretching at all because we've done quite a bit of it. So when you bend through that left knee and we start to slide the strap off, just move that away, bring your knees to center in, and then hands on the bolster. They're kind of on the side and not like on top. The hands are in more of a let's get the bolster away modality. But when I prompt my knees up, I want you to let them really squeeze in so the back has full release mode. Push the bolster, and then maybe you can get both arms to work in tandem. And as you push that bolster down, And sand stuck there. Okay, so soles of the feet, and that means the whole sole, not just like half a foot on feeling the bolster underneath it. So make sure it's close enough for your foot balance. Okay. And then as you push down, as much down as you can maneuver, we don't live on our backs or on all fours. So all this interchange like this is confusing for our muscles sometimes. But I want you to hold the sides of the legs when you get your bridge pose right now. So feel kind of the sides versus pushing the front. And now when they lift, the hips lift up, I want you to encourage these side legs to keep the lift. So it's not just like my hip bones get the lift, but it's my legs are lifting too. I mean, your knees are bending and your feet are down. So it's a complete, disassociation with all the instructions, I know, but try to keep the legs in lift. Okay, now if you feel like your neck is compressed, you want to do less blanket, you could make it flat, a little bit lower. This might be a good time for trying that out all the way up to your shoulders so it's flat, or you got none if the floor is soft enough. And then take a block and another one, try to find them all, and slide the blocks at their mid-height under the back of your pelvis. So if they need to go low height, that's okay. You got these two different heights, low, mid-setting, but you want to have them both in the same height. So they're under the pelvis, not under the mid-back, and then you've got to relax on them. Whew, there's a lot of leg work just to keep that up. Now, for most of us, that leg hip involvement is quite a dualistic feature, right? You're trying to open a space, but you're really gripping to get it open. The truth of that pose, right? You're gripping, your glutes have to fire to get your hips up, and then you're trying to open them up, but the glutes are firing. So, or they're activating. So I want you to feel where the hips rest on the block, and you've got a bolster under your feet. So you're going to slide your feet down. Hopefully you're not too close to a wall space. But if you are, you can let your feet touch the wall. That's really wonderful. And I'm going to get a feeling of my legs separating enough so my spine doesn't take as much compression. Remember, the wider that the knees are, there's less spine compression and a little more openness at the quads. And the old school version, we taught a lot of the legs were as close as they could be. You kept pulling them in. And we started that way, right? We had the belt buckling up the legs so they're closer. So now we're going into kind of freeing them up. So let the hips relax, the whole frontal bone rests open. Breathe, so you have to feel that movement in the lungs, and let your arms rest down. So they're not up by the side. Shoulders roll down and in, chest open. Yeah, I think in time you can get pretty mobile with these actions in your lungs and your movement. The gravitational pull in the organs is different, right? My daily habit is they drag down and prolapse when I walk. So now I can rebalance, right, those areas. So if you can get into this and be somewhat cozy, that's advancing in your practice. Yeah, this blanket feels too low for me right now, for whatever reason. So you might have to figure out what will work for you with your blanket. Some days different than others. Not always the same. That happened for me when I moved my shoulders back and under. I needed a little more height. Okay, now if your legs are kind of a little squirmy or shaky, get a feeling here. You can always bring your feet back on top of your bolster. We're going to go into our final spinal, so we're going to do a couple deep hip kind of rinsers, and then we'll finish the session. But I want you to get a feel right now. If the back is pressing, like you feel some mild compression above the blocks, right? That would be the place it might happen. Notice when you walk your feet up on the bolster, your knees point out, your feet slide up. If that goes away, that just disappears. So it gives you a little information about your quads, the hip flexor, the psoas tension. Gives you a little information about trying to relax that space in the front. Up dog would be a good practice pose. That pose we just did would be a good one to add to your regimen a little bit here and there. This is fine too, without the legs straight. But push down into your feet. Now feel if it's a little different to get your hips up. If you're still really doing a lot of energy to push, you might feel a little liberated, like, oh, I can get the hips up. This isn't too bad, because they've opened up. So you're going to slide the blocks out. And as you lower the spine, take it slow, slow, slow. We're going to take one crossover on each hip. So I want you to glide the spine down. And this is a packed one with sand option. Okay, now push the bolster to the right. If you need to bring your knees to your chest to complete that little segment, go for it. So bolster to the right side of your mat and right leg down, left leg over. If the bolster is too low, like let's say you swing your leg to the bolster, sometimes the sand pack will help you get the leg down. Like now made your leg 10 pounds heavier. But sometimes a blanket on top of the bolster is essential. So if you need that, add the blanket, take props, and then add a ball to the sacrum and open the left arm out. Like feel like it's opening either out to the left or a little bit down to the left. And I've seen use of a block like under the arm. I just haven't found that works like at all for my shoulders or chest muscles. But if you want to add those kinds of, trials, see what other props would help your practice in the use of the pose. But rest your eyes, feel where there's the most casual brain roll. No big deal. Just letting go. Feel where the right knee may bend a little bit. Now with that breath expanding and relaxing, deflating, feel your head roll back gently to center. And as you move the sand and maybe you move your ball and then you go to the second side. So feel the feet slide in, the knees point up, and then you've got to adjust your back so that you're centered. And then the bolster to the left side, okay? So when I move the bolster to that other side and I reset some of the props, you'll move and again, the blanket might need to go a little bit higher since we did the bridge pose. You might want this one back to that quarter fold. And then the right leg crosses over. Yeah, so use the bolster, use the sand, use the ball. Okay, let's see what's going on there. Okay, so when you cross over with that right leg, you're going to get a feeling of the sensation balance of that right side of the spine. So think about the paraspinals, the muscles along the right side of your spine are directing down, and then the ball, it doesn't have to be stuffed in so it's uncomfortable. So if any of you are trying to force the ball, or maybe just even a light touch of that is enough. And then your body kind of sinks back into the ball a little bit. No, I think the ball could be, I would miss it if I didn't have it for this pose now. So if your head turns towards the right side, that's funny. We have a couple that have the exact same colors in their yoga clothes today. It's nice. Good to see. So turning your head to the right and feeling where the waist turns. Right? There might be a minimal waist rotation. The sandbag may not even feel like enough sometimes. Right? You don't need to add more weights to find one is probably plenty if you use one at all. Yeah, feel where there's this mild motion in the rib cage. And it's soothing with the breath exchange. Okay, now when you do slide the ball and the sand, you want to get a complete sacrum circle. So you're going to move the sand away and then circling along the outer rim of the sacrum. So knees going towards the chest, and you pull them in just that right amount. So not too much, not too little of an angle through the spine. Almost as adaptive as possible, where you can hold onto the knees and go both directions. Okay, so let's get the feet up high. So you might bring your knees into your chest and use your arms strong to bring yourself up to sitting. But get 2 blocks and make a little bolster bench here. So we got our 2 blocks, mid-height. Some of you can go up higher, I know. And as you place that support of the bolster and then another blanket on top of that, plenty of height here for the legs. You could roll this blanket up so it's even more height and then let the legs lift up. So when I have my thighs in this version of circulation, I want to get as close as I comfortably can get. So some of you might find that you need a little space away from the props with your thigh unit, right? So the thigh unit has a curve on its own to the hip joint. And then if you have a blanket underneath your head, or maybe you have it under your spine, you don't want to have too much padding to lift your brain up, right? This is not lifting up with a pillow. It's actually helping your neck to have this length back. And then sand either on your shins, if you didn't get it there already, you can toss it up there, or you can put sand across the ribs for some weightlifting for your breathing muscles. Okay. If you're not super jazzed about the sand here, you could put it onto the abdomen too, in the front of the hip bones, and work with that massage of the organs. So be interested here in where that sand might go. I'm going to put it in between those 2 spaces, so it's kind of right in the digestive tract. All right, so you can kind of feel, where I want to work my circulation with the sand. Arms are sending themselves open, no distractions with too many extra interactions with props, just here. And scanning the feet, letting them just float. Feeling the legs supported and the muscles throughout the legs surrendering. And experiencing that full inhalation through the nose, filling the belly. Feeling the breath moving. So if you choose not to use a sandbag, you could also put your hands in on the abdominal area and feel the breath in your hands. That could be really nice too. You can even change any time so you can feel the breath connecting into your hands. Scan the weight of the hips, balanced on both sides. The back of the hip, the front of the hip. And just find that inner spaciousness, right? The infinite internal. And letting consciousness surrender. Now, if you have sand on your middle, slide it away. Come back to those hands to the center. And as we approach transition, just feel that delicate motion of the bones at the very back of the pelvis. You know, they accentuate how we travel, right? Even though you might think of travel as being in a car or something else, but your legs is your main ability to travel, your travel companions. So that pelvis is really can be quite diverse in its movement. So feel where it's in a natural arch and then feel how it kind of flattens out with the breath. And then somewhere in between, right? So it's a good place to notice hip flexors and areas that can get kind of jangled up or grippy. Just let it go. And then start to slide your feet in. If you've got sand on them, that might be a little bit challenging, but bring your knees in towards your chest and hold on to the backs of the legs. And then just roll to the side. You might do a little side to side massage onto your back. Nothing like body weight to do the massage on your back. And then as you come up from rolling, you center your seat and feel where the knees are either out pointy or maybe you prefer them a little bit forward. And let's take a single moment here where our hands lift up in front of the heart center. Brain rests down, that latch at the very top of the neck into the skull, relaxing towards the hands. And feel the breath, hear the breath, and exhale, bowing into your heart.